In this video, I'm going to explore the executing domain in a little bit more detail and hopefully give you an idea of how these signature themes impact the behavior of an individual. So if you caught the first video on the domains, you'll know that executing domain is oriented around getting stuff done, but the specific nature of this particular domain is rooted in how it wants to get something done. So if you think of beginning with the end in mind, essentially execute themes, each one of these execute themes has an end in mind. So the idea is that the job is not done until that end is achieved. Achiever, arranger, belief, consistency, deliberative, discipline, focus, responsibility, and restorative are all orientated around a specific end in mind. Perhaps the most impactful thing about these themes is the need to control that end point. So each of these are going to have a dramatic impact on the behavior of an individual, because in that individual's mind, that outcome, the visualization of that outcome or the understanding of what that outcome needs to look like is non-negotiable. And the concept of failure is rooted in these signature themes. Failure is that you are unable to achieve that outcome and get it to look a particular way. Obviously, the more execute themes you've got in a person's top 10, the more they're going to want to control the way things end up or look like when completed. And so what you're going to definitely get is a strong sense of control from this particular individual. In contrast, if you've got no executing themes in your top 10, the endpoint is far more flexible, far more dynamic, and in many ways, it is more a concept than a defined entity. So let me just dive into each of these themes very briefly and have a look at their endpoint. As I mentioned in the Achiever video, contrast video, when I contrasted Achiever with Focus, Achiever is really orientated around an endpoint that fits into the person's concept of what success is and what a success is required. So in their mind, the tasks that they take on and the completion of those tasks will be relevant to their bigger picture as to what they are trying to achieve. So for example, if it's in an academic context, then if you need 80% to get it cum laude, and cum laude will allow you to progress along your journey of success, then that is what an achievement will be. Arranger is around the logistical management of resources. This is a signature theme that instinctively understands whether something is organized and under control. The interesting thing about Arranger is it's quite dynamic, which means that that endpoint is around feeling control, even though things are constantly evolving. So an Arranger, in a sense, feels that they are organized, or should I say feels that they have things under control when everything is organized and has its place, and things can be moved around quite dynamically around that as things happen. But the intentionality of Arranger is control in the course of logistical management. Belief is the fundamental sense that today I acted on my values, and those values were an integral part of my behavior today. So someone going to sleep at night will be looking at whether they behaved appropriately or not. Consistency is around rhythm, and what they're looking for is that stability of that rhythm. And so if they look back at the end of their day, they're going to have a look at whether their day was rhythmic the way that they wanted it and look forward to tomorrow being much the same. Deliberative is an intriguing one, often gets misunderstood. But in effect, deliberative sitting and execute means that a person dominant and deliberative wants to first identify the risk factors, which has got really little to do with deliberative. It's got everything to do with the other signature themes. But once they've identified those risk factors, deliberative wants to take active control. And so a person dominant and deliberative is very happy when they feel that the factors that they've identified that could cause an outcome to go wrong are under control. So they are only at or not anxious, should I say. They only happy when they feel that everything is under control, that needs to be under control. And as I say, it's not just controlling anything, it's controlling the specific risk factors. Discipline has in its mind how an endpoint needs to look in terms of a structured endpoint, a precise endpoint. Let me put it this way: they create structure to achieve that precise endpoint. So they're looking very much around technical precision and order. And so if their world and their outcome is ordered the way that they imagined it should be, then they're happy. Focus is interested in, very simply, whether the goal that they set for themselves is reached and ticked off. Responsibility is a little harder, simply because responsibility is orientated around helping others. And so the feedback for responsibility is quite high. The individual that they are helping needs to give feedback and say, thank you for taking responsibility. We appreciate it. Your job was well done. So responsibility is tricky in terms of understanding whether they've done what they're supposed to, because they're very reliant on that feedback loop. But they will only rest until they feel that what has been given to them has been done the way that they committed to do that. Restorative is much like responsibility. Is the problem resolved the way it should be? And as I've mentioned before, restorative works off a template, and that's how they know that it's done. What is interesting is when restorative is orientated towards people, it also requires a very strong feedback loop, because if they have responsibility and restorative, then they need a significant amount of feedback as to how they're doing. And what I've noticed with individuals with responsibility and restorative is that feedback is a continuous process. And some managers might be frustrated because this person appears to be looking for attention when in fact they're just looking for feedback. Remember that each of these themes in Execute are day-to-day themes, which means that the day, or should I say, in your day, there needs to be activities that allow you to complete these particular tasks. And as I mentioned, if Execute is not very dominant in your top 10, or should I say none there, then the day-to-day is really not relevant in that context. So each of these themes, as I say, just to summarize, is about getting things done and achieving a specific endpoint in mind. The more themes you've got, the more you're going to want to control your reality. Oh, yes. And one other thing that I wanted to add to this process was, in terms of general behavior, is these themes are about just quietly getting things done. So these tend to be nonverbal. They tend to be obviously action orientated. And so the more you've got here, the more action orientated you are, the more busy you are, and the more you measure your results based on how busy you are and what you are doing with your day. Many of these signature themes, or should I say that if you deal with a person with lots of these themes, they don't like the concept of sitting still or feeling that you're not moving towards an outcome. And so the concept of rest is a foreign one to them. You need to be busy and you need to be moving towards outcomes all the time. So I hope that helps. I'll be diving into the other domains shortly. But if you've got any questions, let me know.